What part of funerals do you think families overspend on and why? What if I told you that a casket sold to a grieving widow cost her $6,500 when it only cost the funeral home $650? That's a 1,000% markup and completely normal for the industry. You could also supply the exact same casket yourself from the distributor, and the funeral home would legally have to accept it. Most people never question this because they're grieving, they're tired, and more than anything, they just really want to do the right thing. The truth is though, funeral homes rely on this moment, this intense emotion, to sell you things you don't necessarily need. Today, in this video, I'm going to break down how funeral pricing really works, so you and your family aren't overcharged, and you can focus on the things you really need to honour that loved one. Kindly, confidently, and without guilt. You can read our complete funeral guide in the description at goldengoodbyes.com, and that'll take you through step by step how to plan a funeral. It's a great place to start if someone has just passed away and you're not sure where to begin. When someone passes away, a funeral bill can look like a blur of lines. Service fee, care of remains, transport, embalming, viewing, casket, vaults, flowers. It's overwhelming. So let's simplify it and look at what's actually happening behind those numbers. According to the National Funeral Directors Association, the median US funeral with a viewing and burial costs about $8,300. But that's before adding a cemetery plot, vault, or a headstone, which can push this total closer to $10,000, even $12,000. So what does this money cover? Let's break it down. The basic service fee. This is $2,300 and a non-negotiable, consider it an entry fee for the funeral home's time, paperwork, permits, and staff. The transport and preparation falls between $500 and $800, and this includes collecting the deceased and the basic care. Embalming and dressing, $775 median. This is optional in most cases but is needed for a viewing or if it's a funeral with long delays. Use of facilities for viewing service, $1,000. This is often double if you're renting both a chapel and a reception room. Casket. The average retail for a casket is $2,500 to $3,000, but luxury models can well exceed $10,000. Cemetery plots and headstones. These vary a lot, obviously depending on the region and the style, but sit anywhere between $1,000 and $3,000. So the main insight from this is, almost half of the costs aren't used on the service or ceremony. They're used on physical products with a large markup. Funeral homes generally make about 10 to 20% of services, and the markup on physical products will be 300 to 600%. That's not evil, that's business, but you deserve to know it. Funeral homes often have some of the kindest, most generous, helpful people working for them, but at a larger level, these are just businesses and they're built for profit. So when you hear a funeral costs $8,000 to $10,000, here's what you need to remember. The essentials: handling, legal paperwork, and respectful disposition often cost closer to $2,000 to $3,000. Everything else beyond this is a choice. That's not to say go cheap. It's about understanding where the meaning ends and the markup begins. Here are the top 5 hidden markups. Caskets. Wholesale prices can be as low as $650 to $900. Retail averages $2,500 to $3,500. You can legally buy one online, Amazon, Costco, or any of the specialty retailers, and by law a funeral home must accept it without extra handling fees. Vaults and liners. Only required by some cemeteries. These cost $1,000 to $2,000, and most people are told it's mandatory. It's not. It's a maintenance preference. Embalming. The cost is about $775, but it's not required by law. It's only if you're transporting over state lines or if refrigeration isn't an option. Refrigeration in most cases is fine. Package bundles. A silver or platinum funeral package sounds efficient, but it usually includes unnecessary add-ons like extra flowers, memorial books, or upgraded hearses. Pro tip, always ask for the direct cremation or immediate burial cost, because everything else is just an extra. And that'll give you a good baseline to know where some of these things that you might not necessarily need lie. Funeral homes legally have to present these costs. How to avoid overpaying. First, ask for the general price list, the GPL. This is your right, and it will give you an itemized list of everything that funeral offers. Get multiple quotes. I can't stress this enough. Even funeral homes in the same town or city can vary in the thousands. Bring a calm friend. If you're stressed and emotional, this is completely normal for having just lost someone you love. Bring someone a little bit further out of the loop, maybe a family friend or a work colleague, someone who isn't as affected as you are, to be that sounding board as you go through this entire process. Grief clouds judgment. Don't sign package deals immediately. As I said prior, a lot of unnecessary things are wrapped up into these package deals. You don't want to sign one instantly because it just makes it too easy for the funeral home to put in exactly what they want and make those enormous margins and end up costing you thousands. Question every required fee. Don't be afraid to ask, is this legally required? When it comes to embalming or processes for burials, there are a lot of things that a funeral home will just make the assumption that you want or need, but they aren't requirements by any means. And this is something where if you're unable to sort of emotionally ask those questions that you need to or think clearly in that moment, it's so vital to have that friend there for you, because asking questions is the best way to get answers. And you can even bounce these results off of other funeral homes to figure out what is the most value, not just financially, but what carries the most meaning to that loved one who's just passed. Another massive one is to use suppliers for urns, caskets, and flowers. These are the three biggest margin costs in a funeral, and urns specifically can cost, for a funeral home markup, 300 to 600%. Flowers, you can go to a local market or a florist, and you'll often find that those prices are substantially cheaper than those offered by the funeral home. Most funeral homes will use a florist or a market supplier anyway, so really you're just paying them extra for the middleman. You can always bring those flowers in before the service. You can go in and set up, come an hour or two in advance and set up those flowers yourself. Or this is also, I found, a great one to outsource to people who ask to help. When my sister passed away, there was so much on my mum and I's plate that we outsourced to a family friend picking up the flowers. We paid for them, but we said, hey, can you pick these up from the market morning of? And she went, collected them all, set them up, and it was just a giant relief that we didn't have to deal with. But we also weren't getting stung with a massive cost from the funeral home. I think for our case, when we looked into it, it worked out about 200, 300%. Another massive tip to avoid overpaying is don't be rushed. It feels like when someone passes away, you have to make so many decisions so fast, but you don't. Take 24 hours to sit on it, have a think about it, and ring around. Ask friends for support. Ask people who've been in this exact same situation what they did or what they would recommend. And if you have any advice in the comments, be sure to leave it, because it really could help someone else. If I was to break it down into 3 big things you need to do to avoid being overpriced, it's ask, compare, confirm, and pause. Here are a few alternatives that will save money. Direct cremation with a personal memorial later. So this involves cremating the body, placing it into an urn, which you could essentially supply yourself, and then planning a memorial in a place or somewhere separate to the funeral location, to the funeral headquarters, sorry. This could be a community hall, a church, a family home, or even a hillside or somewhere of relevance to you and that loved one and your family. you don't have to work on the grounds of a funeral home for the service. You can hold it private and somewhere else. This also gives you a lot more flexibility with the time and the date. If you have people flying in from interstate or even internationally, cremation can be a great choice because it just buys you that extra time to organize everything. Body donation. Now this is a different one, and one I've sort of thought about myself. Me personally, in my family, motor neurone and Alzheimer's are two big killers, and if I were to pass away from one of these awful diseases and my body could be used to further medical research, I wouldn't mind that. And when the time comes, I'll probably have those discussions with my significant other and my mum and those other people in my life that make those decisions. But to me personally, and this is no judgment if you feel totally different, that if you pass away, it's just a body. If that can help progress science and help potentially my own kids or further generations down my line, I'd love for that to be an option. So this is one to sort of discuss prior, or if someone hasn't passed yet, but you have the opportunity to discuss with them, this can also be an option. This removes a huge amount of fees. Most places that will take these bodies, universities, colleges, medical research facilities will pick up the body for free, and you'll have no added costs to that outside of, eventually a memorial and maybe a headstone if you want to place one in an area of particular significance. The biggest thing you can do to help is pre-plan everything in advance. I know if you're watching this video, this might not be the case and you might have already lost someone, but if you still have that opportunity to talk to them, write down their preferences. Then that gives you a very fixed list that you can follow, and it takes away a lot of the guesswork. You already know what they would do, and you're less likely to be, manipulated by, a funeral home. Not that they're all manipulative, but you're less likely to purchase something you don't necessarily need, or that person who passed away doesn't necessarily want. I've gone over a lot of facts and figures in this video, but I think it's very important to remember that spending less doesn't necessarily mean you care less. Love isn't measured by the size of the casket. It's shown in how honestly and thoughtfully you say goodbye. A calm, simple, meaningful farewell is just as beautiful as an elaborate send-off. If this video helped you understand the industry more clearly, please consider giving it a thumbs up or a share. I just want to get out to more people so they're more informed. It really goes a long way in helping others that are in the same situation. If you want more guides on grief, funerals, and planning, please consider subscribing.